The following podcast contains absolutely no spoilers, and so, onward. Back from its own gap year of sorts, this is the Cloister Room with Tom Dickinson, Two Eyes, No E's, and welcome to episode 005, The Great Genre Panic. Welcome back to the Cloister Room, and if you're still subscribed to us, then thanks for bearing with me during a period of absence. The podcast fell by the wayside, which is sad because it was still in its infancy, but it was all for the purpose of concentrating on my studies, which went pretty well, so we're back now. A lot has happened in the world since you last heard my voice. There was a brand new episode of Doctor Who, which I will now be leaving aside because my sentiments basically echo that of the rest of the internet. More to the point I want to make this week, the fall television season has come and gone for 2009, and I think you'll probably agree with me that genre television is in a pretty sorry state on major American broadcast networks. In fact, for the past couple years, viewing figures have been down across the board, but I think genre TV is having a particularly bad time of it. Fox's Dollhouse has been cancelled, and Fringe is in trouble as well, largely because of poor scheduling. ABC's Flash Forward is rapidly declining and will likely be returning next year, while V had strong initial numbers but ran only for a month during November before going on a hiatus from which it won't return until March, which means its ratings are likely to take a huge hit. And of course, ABC's cult hit Lost is ending this spring. NBC's Heroes, once a ratings juggernaut, is now sharply declining in viewership as well as quality. The only major broadcast network that seems to be doing well with genre shows is the CW, with soapy shows like Smallville, Supernatural, and their new hit The Vampire Diaries. And the only reason these shows are doing well is by comparison to the rest of the CW's failing lineup. CW's shows are the only ones we can confidently expect to see renewed. To sum it all up, genre shows on mainstream broadcast networks are doing pretty badly, and the only shows that seem to do well are those that end up on cable networks, where they get little mainstream exposure and suffer budgetary restrictions. This makes it more likely that in the future, science fiction will retreat to cable networks, the sidelines of American television, where they can only hope for modest success. It's not because the American public has no taste for science fiction or fantasy. The huge box office figures for sci-fi movies dispel that notion. Likewise, it's not that the networks aren't trying. New genre shows do get made all the time. They just happen to get canceled pretty quickly. I want to mention one such recently canceled show, Dollhouse, which is a pretty special and interesting case, and it might be very significant to the future of genre television in the US. The trials of Dollhouse's production have been well documented all over the internet, but I'm going to go over it in brief. Dollhouse was first conceived by writer-producer Joss Whedon of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Firefly fame, and Eliza Dushku, known for playing Buffy's rival Slayer, Faith. They cooked up an idea for a show where Eliza's character, Echo, was an empty person who could be imprinted with any personality and skill set and rented out to the wealthy for whatever purpose. When the two pitched the show to Fox, rather than commissioning a pilot episode, as is common practice, even when a show is sure to be picked up, Fox picked the show up immediately for a 13-episode order. Some fans have accused Fox of not adequately supporting the show, but from the beginning, obviously, they were enthusiastic about making it work, or else they wouldn't have ordered it so immediately. Even so, there were early creative difficulties. The first episode they filmed didn't work, and Joss and Fox both agreed on this. So they decided since it couldn't work as a first episode, they would make a new first episode and make that the second episode, and later they dropped it altogether, leaving them only with 12 episodes, even though the DVD and international releases had been negotiated for 13 episodes, so they had to throw together a new DVD exclusive episode on the cheap. I'm getting a bit too deep into the specifics, but suffice it to say that Dollhouse had creative issues, it had poor ratings, and it had a mixed reaction from the critics, but Fox stuck with it, so a total of 14 episodes got produced, and the 12 of them that were supposed to air did end up airing. Sure, they aired it on Friday nights, which is not an ideal slot, but Dollhouse wasn't likely to do well regardless of where they put it, and the non-competitive Friday slot was the only one where they thought it stood a chance. Hell, Fox even made Dollhouse a guinea pig for its new remote-free TV program, presenting it with limited commercial interruption, allowing for longer episodes, but the show did awfully in the ratings. Everyone expected it to be cancelled. But Fox was still committed to the show. Surprising everyone, they renewed it for a second season. And even though the second season continued to be a ratings flop, and they did have to cancel it, they still committed to producing the whole season order and airing all of the episodes. Now you may be wondering why I'm giving you this history of Dollhouse lesson. It's because I want to prove a point. Contrary to its reputation for not giving shows a chance to find an audience, Fox supported Dollhouse, even to an irrational extent. Now obviously they didn't do it just to promote TV as an art form. Dollhouse is the kind of show that sells like hotcakes on DVDs, so there was some money to be made either way. But the point is that fans of science fiction and genre shows, i.e. cult shows, often wish that the networks would give their shows more of a chance. And it's easy to point at the networks and make them out to be the bad guy, but quite often, that simply isn't the case. Cast your mind back to the previous episode, so very long ago. Sure, I wish Fox hadn't cancelled Terminator the Sarah Connor Chronicles, but I have to admit that they took a chance in renewing it for a second season. That goes double for Dollhouse. They gave it every chance in the world, just as we've been clamoring for them to do with their genre shows for years, but it simply didn't pay off. Which is why, although I like Dollhouse, and even though it hasn't always been great, I think the second season's been pretty strong, I think its renewal was probably a bad thing. Now, if you have a long memory, you might recall that I said the exact opposite thing in the previous episode, but, well, I guess that in the time we've been apart, I've become a bit more pessimistic. Allow me to justify myself. I think that, in renewing Dollhouse, Fox shot itself in the foot, and while the renewal of a struggling show is a symbolic victory of sorts for the fans, the fact that it failed to pay off for Fox means that Fox and the other networks are less likely to repeat the maneuver next season. This might mean that they'll be less likely to look kindly on the struggling Fringe, or that ABC might not be willing to take a chance on V if its spring ratings fail to impress. What this will probably mean is that genre shows will continue to be pushed towards the margins, the cable networks, the land of lower budgets and greater creative freedom. Now, perhaps for those reasons, cable is a better place for writers like Joss Whedon, but isn't it kind of sad that American sci-fi and fantasy TV can't find a place in the mainstream? When I look across the pond, and I fully admit that my perspective might be warped by my Doctor Who fandom and by my living outside the UK, it seems like the British mainstream has a lot more room for sci-fi programming like Doctor Who, Torchwood, Ashes to Ashes, Robin Hood, Merlin, Primeval, and other shows, including imports from the US. These shows are thriving on those networks in the UK, aren't they? Now, I'm hardly an expert on the UK television industry, but it really does seem to me that the reason those genre shows do well in the UK has a lot to do with the success of Doctor Who, which simply has the nation in its thrall. There is no question about whether Doctor Who will be renewed next year. The culture simply seems to assume that Doctor Who is going to exist forever. The show's already suffered a hiatus but then come back, and it's been back for 5 years, and far from winding down like most shows do after 5 years, it is boldly forging ahead into a new era. Doctor Who is confident of its own continued existence, and that confidence is justified. And that simply must be the secret of success of genre TV in the UK. What lessons can the US TV industry learn from this? Well, there really is only one thing that I can think of. We need to manufacture our own Doctor Who. Okay, calm down, I'm not talking about an Americanized version of Doctor Who. Although, I admit it might be cool to see Nathan Fillion as the Doctor. Or, wow, how about Will Smith? Now, what I mean is that a genre television series that could duplicate, in the US, the success of Doctor Who in the UK could solve that problem. Is such a thing even possible? Well, yeah, I think it is possible, even though I think it's kind of unlikely. The reason Doctor Who has had its success boils down to two things. First, its establishment within the British cultural conscious has built up an engine of hype, and second, the fact that the new show is actually really rather good powers that engine. If the US can capture that formula, then maybe it can save genre TV and bring life back to scripted drama as a whole on major networks. Now, there are two franchises I can think of that fit the bill. The first is Star Wars. Star Wars is as much of a cultural touchstone as Doctor Who, and in fact, probably even more of one. Furthermore, there is an upcoming Star Wars television drama series in the works. The problem, though, is that the Star Wars franchise has sort of gone downhill in recent years. The hype engine is there, of course, but it really does need a good series to power it. And if the prequels and the existing animated Clone Wars series are any indication, Lucasfilm simply doesn't have the creative muscle to produce something good enough to work the kind of magic that Doctor Who has been working in the UK. Besides, who knows whether the show will even end up on a major network at all. It might just go to cable. So little is known about the show that it's far too soon to say. The second franchise I have in mind, of course, is Star Trek. Despite a spotty showing on TV over the past decade, Star Trek happens to be undergoing a bit of a renaissance at the moment, thanks to the enormously popular reboot film released earlier this year. But there are no current plans to bring it back to television. It does perhaps have more potential for success than Star Wars, assuming the right creative people are involved. Brian Fuller has expressed interest, and maybe some of the people who worked on the film, like Damon Lindelof, Roberto Orci, or Alex Kurtzman, or even J.J. Abrams himself, would be interested in working on the series. But this is all speculation. No such plans are in the works yet, as far as we know. But that is kind of what the US needs to do to set itself back on the right path, although it sadly looks like it won't be happening. Star Wars and Star Trek both have the name power, but the latter isn't likely to return to the small screen, and the former is, but I don't think it's going to deliver when it does. Maybe there's another way out of this conundrum, but in the meantime, I'm going to continue to be rather pessimistic about the future of genre television in this country. That's pretty much all I have to say on that topic, but before we wrap up, it's time for the Dune Quote of the Week. You should never be in the company of anyone with whom you would not want to die. Duncan Idaho in God Emperor of Doom. And that's about it for this episode. Next time, maybe I'll do a little bit of talking about Doctor Who. I'll try to have a new episode up in the time between the airings of The End of Time Parts 1 and 2, but I think by now you know you can't rely on me. In the meantime, though, feel free to comment on thecloisterroom.com or send me something on Twitter at the Cloister Room. I'd love to hear what you think about the state of genre TV in the US, or maybe I've got the UK situation all wrong and you want to yell at me. Or, hey, even what American actor do you think could play the Doctor? I shot out a Twitter message asking for opinions on that one, and Julian Chapman, known on Twitter as Braxiatel, thought James Spader, Michael Riley, or Robert Downey Jr. could do well. Good choices all, I think. And Stephen of Radio Free Scarrow fame thought Kelsey Grammer might be a good stand-in for the Sixth Doctor. Bit of an odd choice, but you know what? Hey, so was Colin Baker. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that issue or on anything else. You can flame me for being away for so long, or you can flame me for coming back and tell me I should go away again. Either way, this is Tom Dickinson, Two Eyes, No E's, signing off. You have been listening to The Cloister Room, a fan-made production which is utterly unassociated with the BBC, ABC, NBC, CBC, or anyone with initials. No copyright infringement is intended. Oh, and incidentally, a happy Christmas to all of you at home.